Founders, welcome back to the 0 to 5,000 podcast, where we obsess over the convergence of human potential and business results. Today, our hosts Drew McClure and Jordan Mitchell have another insightful conversation for you. So let's jump right in.
All right, founders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are joined by Jake Hurwitz. Jake is a visionary serial entrepreneur who ignited his passion for innovation and connection at the age of 8 by fixing skateboards in his suburban New York neighborhood. Today, he is the founder and creative director of Thursday Labs, a strategic content agency that focuses on crafting meaningful connections with target audiences, driving revenue growth, and building scalable distribution strategies through measurable results. Their services include video production, social media, website design, and more. And today, to tell us about his story is Jake himself. So Jake, thank you for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's so funny. I wrote that bio like probably 6 months ago, and hearing you say it, I'm like, oh boy, we need to update that. So happy to share like some of the updated things. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, my friend.
Let's go back to 8 years old. Is this where you caught the entrepreneurial bug?
I think so. I remember it very vividly, so I'll do my best to paint the picture. I lived in, about 40 minutes north of New York City and loved to skateboard and snowboard. It was like I remember vividly being like, I'm going to be a pro one day. Totally didn't happen, but that was my whole life. And I don't really know where the bug started or came from. But I do know that my dad especially saw these tendencies and interests and patterns in me around that age, and he would start to push on it in a good way and support it. So I thought, how cool would it be if I ran this business where I would repair all the broken skateboards around my neighborhood and got paid money to do that. So I made these flyers on Microsoft Word with clip art and word art.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that stuff? With all the little pull tabs you could pull off the bottom of the paper with your phone number on it. So I used my parents' house phone number because I 8 years old in whatever year it was. We didn't have a cell phone. Printed out 250 flyers on my mom's printer in the kitchen, and then took every single one and cut the little dotted lines on the pull tabs. It took hours. And then I would skateboard around the neighborhood for a few hours, and I put them in every single mailbox in the neighborhood. Yeah, it was probably 200 some odd homes. About a day later, my parents got a phone call from the town, or, the neighborhood board saying, I have to remove every flyer because it broke the guidelines, and if I do it again, they're going to be fined thousands of dollars. Totally. And so that was my first run-in with trying to do something innovative, I guess, and getting the handcuffs slapped on me, or getting my parents really he's an 8-year-old kid trying to do something cool for the neighborhood. You're going to be that shitty about it. But turns out I didn't do my market research. There weren't a lot of skateboarders in the neighborhood, let alone those who needed their boards repaired. But there was one neighbor I had, this very sweet old man who went to the store, bought a skateboard, drove over it with his car, which snapped it in half, and then he hired me for $10 to fix it. I couldn't fix a skateboard that had been broken.
How are you going to relaminate that thing as an 8-year-old?
Yeah, totally. So it went from I'm starting this business to about 48 hours later, I'm going to shut down this business because we almost got fined, and I had one unsuccessful client. But that's really where it all started. Ever since then, I was that kid in high school that I was selling custom Vans sneakers because I was an artist growing up, and I'd teach art classes at the local nature center that I started, and built this peer tutoring business. The best business I built from a margin standpoint ever was stay-at-home moms would give me huge boxes of all their VHS tapes, and I would just burn them to Google Drive using a VHS to DVD converter and then DVD to hard drive. And I would just plop them in, press start, press stop while I was doing my homework after school. And I would charge $30 or $50 a tape. And they'd give me boxes of 100 tapes. So I was just racking up cash as a 14-year-old kid after school just by doing that, sending them. So yeah, I was just always that kid. And that led to then my first real company when I was 18, which was a marketing agency, just a run-of-the-mill agency. led me to like building tech startups. Then I got into venture capital for a while, and now I'm almost 30 and building Thursday Labs, which I think is the culmination of, I mean, all of it. Like a lot that I saw in venture, and a lot of the pitfalls I saw with like how founders build, create content for themselves, build thought leadership, using a lot of same LLC, like a lot of the processes, documents, all that for what I built the agency on 10 years ago. So anyway, that's the general high level intro story of like the origins of all this stuff.
Super cool. What do you think, looking back, attracted you to the creating of your own business? Is it the creative side that you clearly have? Is it the freedom idea of working for yourself? Like, what do you think was attracting you to that?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. There's the like cool fun side, and then there's the like logistical financial side. I'll start with the logistical financial side. I don't know why I chose that one to start with, but let's just start there. To paint the picture, it was high school, and it was like 2009, 2010, so right after 2008, and I lived in New York, and my mom worked in real estate. My dad was in like early .com world and advertising and media. And so we got hit pretty hard, like everyone did. I mean, I had a lot of friends whose parents worked on Wall Street, and they lost everything, like had to leave, move out of their house and like leave town. And it wasn't many years after 9/11 either. Like it was just like a hard era for folks, kind of like round two of like, fuck, life's tough in America. And I was a kid. And so long story short, I had all these little siblings. My parents got remarried to new people when I was a kid, and then had babies when I was 12. And I lived in one of those like townhouse communities that was off of a main road. So I couldn't walk to the skate park, couldn't walk to school. It was like a highway basically. So I was very trapped. And gas prices were really high. My parents, they weren't going to they couldn't buy me a car. I was like, God, I'm miserable. Like I'm coming home from school every day to a house full of like crying babies. All I want to do is like smoke weed and drink beer with my friends and be a degenerate and like skateboard and do graffiti. That's all I wanted to do. And they were all doing that. And I felt very, very left out. So I was like, all right, I got to buy a car. How do I afford a car? And I did the math. And then it was like, okay, once you get the car, then you got to get insurance. And you got to get gas, and gas was like almost $5 a gallon in 2011. Like we're doing that now in California. Like that was a long time ago, pre-inflation. It was very expensive for a moment. So I did the math, and I was like, if I get a job at the pizza shop or the movie theater, like a normal high school kid for minimum wage, working the amount of hours I have after school, outside of hockey practice, weekends, like there still just would not be enough money, even if it's under the table cash, to afford a car and to be able to like get out of my parents' house. So I thought, well, I need to make like $20 to $30 an hour with the amount of time I have, all the waking hours I have to be able to pull this off. So that's where I logistically was like, how do I do that? So I started like a tutoring business where I'd get paid $30 an hour to tutor kids in like first grade math. And I was just like, it helped me get really good at talking to parents and adults as a high school kid and not be like a little asshole who couldn't look them in the eye. Custom Vans sneakers. I was like, how do I leverage YouTube and like early days of Facebook to like get clients on the internet that would want to buy like a $300 pair of white Vans, canvas Vans that I painted with like Grateful Dead bears on it or something. And that's just where I got the early itch of like, damn, like, there's a lot of tools at my disposal to just do things a little bit differently. It's a little bit harder at the beginning. Well, it's actually way harder the entire journey of it, but the upside is just so much higher. And that's where like I got an early taste of it in high school. The fun side of it though, I've always said like screw authority. And, I was the kid with like a little skateboard and tight jeans and like patches on my backpack. I would like hop fences and do graffiti. And we just were always having these little run-ins. I never got arrested, thank God, and had run-ins with the law, but it was always like just about on that line and pushing the boundaries of it. And so I look at a lot of people I grew up with that were in the action sports world and kind of always part of like heavy counterculture. And many of them ended up either not in a good place, but quite a few ended up doing incredible things because it taught us this early, like question authority, question the status quo, break the rules, bend the rules rather, and like figure out sort of your own way around it. And the combination of those two things, I was just like, and I've tried, I've had a couple of jobs here and there, like real adult jobs. And every time realize like I'm like the worst employee ever. because I just try to like change everything. It's just, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. What's cool is, they say that need or necessity is often one of the biggest drivers for innovation, right? So
Yeah,
you found yourself
100%.
in a need of like, I need mobility. I need to be able to drive and get out of here. I want spending cash. And it
Yep.
forced innovation and creativity out of you. And then you take the joy and a little bit of the middle finger
Yeah.
of, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to be controlled. Really makes sense how that could create a super entrepreneur out of you.
Totally. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's a cool analogy that someone shared with me recently that I started to share as well, which I love, which is like, you're stuck in a hole, like literally, like imagine a hole in the dirt and it's like 9 feet deep. So it's just too tall for you to climb out of it right now. And there's nothing in there. There's no ladder. There's no stairs. Like, how do you get out of this hole? You're sitting there, you're thinking, you're forced now to think about it. And you realize like, all right, I got all this mud and there's like a little bit of rain coming soon. I can maybe turn this into like mud blocks. And then the sun comes out and it turns those mud blocks into almost like cinder blocks. And now I can create a few of those. And now I'm able to create almost like a ladder for myself. And now I'm out of the hole. But it took being in that hole and dealing with like the rain and the like hot sun and building some shit with your hands to even get out of it in the first place. Now you get all these new skills. Now you've dealt with some serious adversity. What's going to happen when you're in the next hole? Even if it's bigger, like, how to get out of it. Now I'm like, I don't care about being in holes. It's no big deal. I just care. It like unlocks this whole new world of like, what can I do?
Yeah.
And I had it happen 3 times this year, let alone like in my career so far, which has been about a decade now, like my real career. And so
I'd love to hear about one of them if you don't mind. Like, it's such a great analogy, and I'd love to see like, man, what kind of hole did you find yourself in, and what did the innovation look like?
Yeah. There's one that comes to mind for sure, which was so I launched Thursday Labs in March of 2023. And for anyone listening, it's the end of November of 2023. So like 9 months ago or so, 8 months ago. And I launched it with a beta client. And the beta client was essentially me being like their fractional CMO with an emphasis on like creating a lot of organic content and like building up their thought leadership through podcasting and running their socials and like all those short form clips of them, kind of like what you see Joe Rogan or Alex Hormozy doing. And I was like, this is like really interesting. We're seeing a lot of this on the web. ChatGPT is coming out. Like maybe I can produce this type of content really efficiently. So anyway, started with them. It was a great start. We had incredible results. I was making good money. And I was like, all right, cool. How do I then translate this to 4 or 5 clients at a time? And that's my book of business. And I'll be like a fractional CMO. And I'll work like 30 hours a week and I'll get to play with my dog and surf a lot and all that. That didn't happen at all. I wasn't able to, I burned through my savings, which I had about, living like tight and modest, I could last about a year when I started this business. Living normally, like as I did without really changing a whole lot, I was able to last about 6 months. So I was like, I have about 3 to 6 months to like get this thing to having more money than I started with. And we're in month 6 and I'm down to like all the money I saved for, ups and downs over the years. And there's been lots of them. I'm down to like a month left of expenses. And I haven't been here in quite a while. And like, damn, is that a shitty feeling? But I've been there before and I've had to always crawl out of that hole. So I'm in this hole. It's like, I have no prospects now. The market's just trash. Something's not working. I got to like figure out, I have to pivot in some capacity, or I got to go like get a job. And like, then I really start from square one again, like back to like no more savings. I got to dip into like stock market money that I'd been put away for years. And it sucked. And to be like almost 30 years old and looking at that again, like it's fine when you're 23. It's fine when you're 25. When you're like 28 years old, it doesn't feel fine anymore, even though it kind of is a big deal. But so I had to like really almost soul search and like look at my ego and be like, why isn't this working? Like, why am I charging this much money? Why am I like offering what we're offering? Like what's actually working for my clients? What are they actually paying for? Like, where's the real value here outside of just like what I thought they needed? I needed to really look at like what was really working. And it's funny because you know, as a VC or as an entrepreneur in general, you give this advice to any entrepreneur, but then to take it yourself when you're like actually there, it's a little bit harder. So I started exploring slightly different models of like, do I do more of a like scalable, but much cheaper, like done for you model where it's, everyone gets like the same offering. It's not bespoke for every client. And we're not charging like 25, 30 grand a month. It's like 6 grand a month. I mean, but then I got to work with more people. Do I explore like a sponsorship model where I get like somebody else to pay for this type of work for somebody? And so I put out these offerings and doubled the revenue that we were making in like a month. And so it was really about like having you forced to really look at like how are we packaging this? How are we selling this? Not even just like what words are we using, but like how are we actually positioning this in the market and like what's the story around why it exists this way? Had to just like really dig deep on that one and redesign it. And then it finally like landed and resonated. It's like you're always coming really damn close to the edge and then you're forced to like figure it. So that was the most recent one at a high level. So yeah, we started like from there, the company just like completely took off. And now I don't have cash issues. We've got scaling issues because that's the next level of problems. Yeah, that's the most recent one.
Was the main thing just finding especially the current kind of state of the market, was it finding the right price point? Was that kind of the main thing?
I think it was, yes, of course, the price, but it was also me having to shift and get some coaching on like, stop thinking about price and think about value. Like price.
Talk about that.
Is like, I mean, price is almost like a poor person's game. It's like a scarce mindset of like, what's the price of this coffee? It's like $5. If you say to someone like, how many people in this room want this $25 cup of coffee? Like no one's going to raise their hand. But when you say to them, I've got a cup of coffee here that has like the most incredible healing powers in it, and it'll help you like live forever. And when you drink it, you're going to feel like a superhero. And then like all the greatest athletes in the world drink this coffee every morning. It's $25. Who wants it? Everyone's going to raise their hand. All you did was just kind of communicate the value in a different way and measure the value in a different way. And so that was a big thing. So if I'm like, it's $6K a month and you're going to get X, Y, and Z out of it, people then have to think about what is that worth to me? Like, is that going to bring me back $7K a month? Is that going to bring me back $50K a month? Like, what's the ROI? And like, you're putting the work on them to then have to decide like, okay, I get the price, but then what's the value? But if you just shift the whole conversation to be like, this is what you're going to get out of our endeavor. All of these things are like what we can guarantee. And then all of these things are what we've seen other clients get that we can't guarantee, but like you can expect stuff similar to this. And to them, they're seeing that as the promised land. And that's worth, it's unlimited. It could be worth 10 grand to them. It could be worth 100 grand to them. It could be worth $1 million to them. Like they can see so clearly how it's going to change their lives and change their business and bring all this revenue. And it does. And then I'm like, and it's expensive. And now they're thinking, oh my God, this is going to be like $50K a month, $100K a month. And I'm like, it's expensive, $6 grand a month. And they're like, oh, that's not bad at all. But we still landed at the same price. And so selling and marketing and communicating value versus price was, I had been told that for a long time, but I didn't really ever like get to exercise that. And that changed my life, genuinely changed the entire business, changed everything. And it just blew up from there. And now I look at things like that too. I'm like, I go to the grocery store and it's funny how I'm like, all right, I look at this pasta versus that pasta. This one's $9, that one's whatever. And I'm looking at the ingredients and I'm thinking like, what's the value in me having $9 pasta versus $2 pasta based off of how they're positioning it, and now I'm thinking like, if I were to sell $9 pasta like this one, like I probably would be I'd have a different color on the package. I'd have like a different slogan. I'd make the ingredients bigger. Because there's me again trying to change everything.
Yeah. No, I love that. That is a huge, huge insight and lesson for often a struggling business, like going to a super successful business that maybe didn't even change much of its operations in terms of what it's doing, but understanding the value and how to proposition it and how to prove it, track certain things. If someone's listening right now and they're in that stage, where do they start? How do they start looking at their business and find what is the value that we're really offering and how do we quantify that? Like, is there any questions they could ask? Or
that's a good question. Let me think about this for a sec. I mean, if I were to like prescribe or look back at like where we went through it, I think there's an exercise you could do, which is, first of all, like you got to check your ego at the door because this one's hard. sit down, pull out a whiteboard for like an uninterrupted Saturday afternoon or a Sunday. Like there's no emails coming in, no one's bothering you. You need to think. You might even need to like have a few drinks if that's what you need to get there. Like you gotta, some people it's like do some minor psychedelics, whatever it is. You gotta like take yourself and your emotion out of this. Don't think about the bills you gotta pay. Don't think about, what type of cash flow you need, what your price point needs, what salary you need to feel proud. Like put out of the room for a second and then ask, of the people I've worked with over the last, 6 months or year or whatever, recent time period you want to think of, I'd probably say like 6 months, 80-20 rule. What did you do that took 20% of your time and effort, but got them 80% of their results? And so when I did that exercise, I made a list. I was like, what are all the things I did for this like beta client? Like what was our deliverables over the last 6 months? It was like 15 things I was doing for them on a daily basis. Some small, some big. Everything from like booking their guests for them on a podcast, like posting their things on social media, like building landing pages, running their ads, like all this marketing stuff. And then I took another color and circled all the things on that list and we're like, and which of these items like actually brought the most results and ROI and value? And it was like 4. It was like 4 of those things. And I looked at those 4 things and I was like, I can do all of those 4 things for each client in like 3 hours a week. And those 4, I don't know if this can apply to everybody, but at least for me, I was like, and there was this weird pattern where like those 4 things are the most efficient and can be easily automated and like handed off to an extent to either an AEA or some AI. And I was like, fuck, like I can build a business on this. So I think the starting point, and then it was like, and what was that worth? Like, and then I just kind of knew, it just like popped into my head. I was like, this is like around like 6 to 8 grand a month. It's not 23 grand a month, but I can do this with 10 more. Like, and now if we're making 30K a month doing it with 2, but now if I do it with 6, we're making 60K a month. We just doubled our revenue, but it was like a different shift. And I had to really think like, damn, I'm not putting this price, I'm not charging a premium anymore, like that high. And like, how do I make, there's going to be a dip in the salary I make while I ramp this up. And I put it out there and everyone bought it like immediately. Everyone's like, oh yeah, great. Sounds good. So I think that's step 1. Step 2, simultaneously, and this is, I think, a new insight I had this year, and I'm telling a lot of people this one. I love this one, which is we're at this moment in time. This is very timely with the market where like people are really overwhelmed. People are really busy and people are really stressed and anxious with everything. It's the end of the year. It was a terrible year economically for a lot of people. A lot of people are on the job market and really struggling, dipping into their savings, not talking about it, not sleeping. Like it was a tough year. And so we have a lot on our mind. And now if I come to someone and I'm like, hey, you want to buy my product? Like I'm going to sell it to you. And they're like, okay, great. Like what does it cost? What do I need to do? Like, what are you going to do for me? And I'm like, well, let's discuss that. I've got a range. We could do this for 10K a month or this for like 20K a month or this for 30K a month. And we could do it for 3 months. We could do it for 6 months. And this is what like consultants do. We create a custom package. And that's what every agency in the world does. And now what's actually happening is the prospect, the person I'm selling to, has a lot to think about. They got to go sit down with their co-founder or their partners, and they got to think like, all right, well, should we do this for 10K a month? Should we do this for 30K a month? Like, should we start next week? Should we start in 3 months? They're not even going to have that conversation. Like, it's such a low priority for them unless it's like do or die, which it's not. So I kept finding myself checking in and being like, hey, when do you want to chat again? Like, are you down to, it's just like following up with people. If I feel like I'm following up with people over and over again in sales, something's off. It's a bad product or like, that's a sign that like something's off. And so I think everyone needs to shift it now to, it needs to be a no-brainer. What you're selling needs to be a no-brainer. And that doesn't mean it needs to be like obvious as far as the price and value. Yes, that's a given. But what it actually means is they don't need to use their brain to say yes. They should be able to literally just like be like, great, send me the deal contract. Like, where do I sign? And until that is happening, you haven't figured it out. And I think that's the new learning, the new mindset. So I started to go to people and be like, it's $6,000 a month for 4 months. We need to start you in 2 weeks. And here's why. If we don't start you in 2 weeks, you're going to miss a massive opportunity. And I'm moving on to the next person who does want this. This is exactly what you're going to get every week. This is exactly what I need from you every week. So you can expect only 1 hour for this and 2 hours for that. Here's a very clear, detailed schedule of like what you're signing up for. And these are the expected results. It's almost like a syllabus for a new class. You got to be here at this time And if you want to be successful, this is what you got to do. And if you don't want to be successful, this is what you got to do. And this is what it costs. And it's at a price point where they don't really need to like go have a board meeting about it. They can just be like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And now I got it. Now they're in. Then I can upsell from there after a month or 3 months because they love us. And it just started working. And so I look at all these like consultants and agencies and salespeople that sell something that's more of a service. And I'm like, package it into
A process.
A process, a product, a program, a sprint. I just saw another example of this dude. I've been following him on LinkedIn for a while now, a couple of years, and he's a graphic designer. He's an amazing logo designer, right? And he puts out a lot of his own work for all his clients on LinkedIn, his portfolio, and he's great. And I haven't had a need for it in a while because I'm like, I know how it goes. I'm also a graphic designer. So it's like, yeah, well, what does it cost? And they answer, well, what's your budget? And it's like, well, I don't know, 25 grand. Like, cool, this is what I could do for 25 grand. But like, what's your budget? Fucking zero. I don't want to spend on anything. So like, that's the answer. So he just put out the other day a 3-day for $5 grand branding sprint. So if you're a company that doesn't have a logo and in 3 days you want to have a great logo and brand guidelines document, color palette, all this stuff, all I need from you is you to fill out this worksheet, upload these files, show up for 1 hour, give me $5,000, and in 3 days, this is what you're going to have. I think he made like 100 grand in like an hour. Like that's how people, they just need to be like, yeah, sounds great, done. Because then there's all these other logo designers out there that are trying to sell me on their whole thing, and it could take 6 weeks, and it's whatever how much I want to spend, and there's all these custom packages. I don't want to think about this. I got to deal with like taxes next year. That's way bigger priority. So that's the lesson here, man. This is like a crazy year for it.
I'm so glad I asked that question because your answers were phenomenal. I want to start with the most recent one and then go back to the first answer you gave. But that idea, so my business is somewhat consultancy. Like I do coaching for our executives, for their leadership teams, that kind of thing. I know exactly the trap you're talking about, and I even fall into it, which is it feels appealing to do the custom route and to give a bunch of options and like, well, you know, we could do it like this, we could do it like this. But like you said, there's almost decision fatigue. Where you're like, dude, you gave me homework. You made this like a lot on my end to figure out what I want. And to take some of that away is removing some friction, is what I'm hearing. Yeah. And then people also psychologically trust the process.
100%. They don't know what they would need. It's like, hey, can you build me a house? And then the architect being like, well, great. Do you want a 6,000 square foot house or like a 2,000 square foot house or a 40,000? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what could I never built a house for. I don't know what I'm doing. I trust you less. But if they just came to me and were like, this is what you need. I've seen a million people like you. This is what you need. I'm like, cool. Yeah, I trust you.
Yes, man. That's phenomenal. That is fantastic advice. Take some of the decision points away, make it easier, make it clearer, turn it in. There probably is, even if you don't know it, there probably is a process that you trust that if you were just to give it a name, give it a time frame, you also created some urgency. That idea of like, hey, start in 2 weeks. Like that's the cutoff point. Like that urgency drives a decision, you know, like shit or get off the pot. Like I'm not going to chase you down for 6 months. It creates some demand, you know, where you're like, dude, I'm not waiting around for 6 months. I got 2 weeks, you know, then we're shipping off to someone else. Now if you go about that, obviously with a certain attitude, it's going to turn people off, but that is really, really smart. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I'll share. It's funny. I asked my coach like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was struggling for a while. Like, how do I drive urgency without it being about me? Cause I don't feel right saying to people like, I need your answer by next week, which is arbitrary. And then I'm moving on to the next person.
I'm so busy. I'm so great. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's about me. And I didn't love that. So I was like, how can I craft urgency that was more relevant to them and not about me? And we came with a couple of really good answers that I think I'd love to share if it's like valuable. And I've been playing with it and it's been really helpful, which is, here's a great example, like the one I've been sharing the most. I've been hearing chatter lately about LinkedIn launching soon, like their own influencer world. So like on Instagram or TikTok, influencers can get paid great money to just like put out content and push products, but you got to say and share like this is a paid promotion. LinkedIn's potentially launching this in Q1, which is a very big deal. And in my opinion, a very good move for LinkedIn. I can't guarantee this. I can't verify it. So for anyone listening, I just have heard some chatter. So like, I don't know. But either way, I'm thinking, wait a second. Let's say this launches in Q1. They're going to start with their most promising. They're going to offer this tool to probably their most promising up and coming voices and thought leaders who have really powerful niche audiences. I don't know if that means they need to have like 100,000 followers or 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, but either way, like that's where thought leadership is going. Great signal. So I've been saying to potential clients and prospects, I'm like, hey, I'm pretty sure this thing's going to launch on LinkedIn in Q1. I'm here to get you ahead of the curve and ready for that so that when that thing launches, you're already an influential voice. And so you're not leaving money on the table. But if you wait until February or March or Q2, you're going to miss the opportunity to be one of the early people to use this new groundbreaking thing on LinkedIn. I don't care. Like I've got clients who do want it. So let me know if you're in, but if you want to be ready for that, we got to start next week. And now they're like, it's not about me. And they hear that as, wow, Jake's really looking out for my success here. Like Jake cares about us being successful and being ready for that. So that I started playing with things like that. Like, let's get you ready for this event. Let's like get you to maximize ROI before your big board meeting. Let's get you to impress that investor who's going to be at that conference that you're speaking at in 3 months. Like now there is a real deadline that's more than just as arbitrary. Like we need you by the end of the week so that we can close deals before the end of the year. They don't care about that.
Well, I like that. I mean, that's another great exercise. Like if you imagined, for those like us that like surfing, if you imagine you're kind of out in the water, you got your clients or potential clients out there on boards, and you're just looking in the distance saying like, what wave is coming? And if I can spot a wave, a trend, an opportunity that's coming, all I'm doing is letting them know this wave is coming. We better start paddling now. If you want to catch it, right? Like, don't be the one who watched that go by, you know?
Totally. It's a great analogy. I love to surf. I love how surfing is like one of the best analogies for business and life. And you trust me because I've been doing this for a lot of years. I know how to spot when waves are coming that no one else can spot yet. And if you either, it's almost intense. If you stay in the water and you're not prepared for that wave, you're gonna get crushed. And I don't want that for you because I've been there. And I had to learn, and let's get you to this point. It's a great analogy.
Well, and there's a different kind of crush too, man, because especially for ambitious people, there's nothing more soul crushing than watching other people ride a wave that you missed.
Totally. You're
like, that was like you were out there waiting for hours and you see somebody else catch a wave that you're like, that was the one I was waiting for. And you're having all the fun. Yeah. And I'm sitting here in the still water, you know?
They've said, my coach told me this as well. He's great. Of like, when I was thinking like, do I go big with my company or not? He was like, some have said that hell is you like standing at the gates of hell, seeing a movie play of everything you could have done in life, but didn't do. And just, you have to sit through and endure and watch that movie. And I'm like, fuck, that is my version of hell for sure. To watch someone else go take what I saw and could have done, but just like was too lazy to do or didn't do it or waited too long.
It's really good.
It's a great picture. So I'm curious, let's like hack this for a sec. On the programming and processing side, and you focus on coaching, like what could you shift and enact or bring to the market that kind of fits this general framework of like, it's a no-brainer, it's a process, and it does work for your clients in some way. Is there anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I would need to bring. I mean, I'm trying to both interview you and I'm listening and trying to brainstorm at the same time. Where I'm like, no, there's meat here for me. Like, and we've seen it applied already. I think I need to apply it again. It's like where you go from too broad a spectrum to narrowed, and that's where we are. And it's like I'm hearing from you, like I need to do that process again, right? So like one of the things we did was, again, all these complicated offers where it was like, hey, we could do this one-to-one, we could do this group thing, we could do this for a time period, I can build this out for you so you have an evergreen content program, blah, 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 blah. Yep. One of the newest kind of opportunities we're expanding in, I made it real simple. And I just said, hey, you've got a lot of emerging leaders, people that just don't feel like they're equipped for leadership. They got the position, but they don't have a clue how to lead people. Yep. I'm going to do toolkit sessions. It's real simple. One tool a month to increase their effectiveness as a leader. They get to hear me talk about it, dialogue about it, and it's sold so easy and so much faster that way. I didn't give them any other offers. Here's what I'm spotting. Here's what I know you need. and it lasts for 12 months and it's one tool a month and it's blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
But I still think I could do that better based on your first answer. So your first answer, the 80-20 rule, is the most amazing. Like, I remember where I was when I read the 80-20 principle.
Where were you?
I was sitting in the park in Atlanta, downtown Atlanta. It was a random Sunday afternoon with my wife. We didn't have kids at the time. And I had seen that book and it intrigued me and I picked it up. And I remember thinking, damn, if this is true, this changes everything.
Yeah.
And I'm a little mad that I haven't applied it more aggressively, because every time I have, it has led to phenomenal results. But just that idea of like 20% of anything you're doing is generating 80% of the results, or, 20% of your clients are 80% of your revenue. Or you could flip that. 20% of your clients are probably 80% of your headache.
Yep.
Like, what would it look like to get rid of them,
Yep.
But when on your first answer, doing the 80-20 rule, there's a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan. He's a legendary executive coach since like the 70s, working with entrepreneurs and all that stuff. And in his experience, he said it was literally easier for someone to 10X their company or 10X their revenue than it is to double it. And he said the reason why is to double it is doing a lot of the same, just more.
Sure.
So if you're like, I need to double my revenue or double my team, he's like, you're basically gonna do everything you're already doing. You're just gonna do it harder.
Yeah.
And he said 10X requires an innovation, and it's typically letting go of 80% of the stuff that isn't really working and doubling down on the 20% that is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it leads to a disproportional result, And so that sounds like exactly what you were doing. Where you're like, man, I realized there's only 4 things that I was doing.
Yeah.
That we got phenomenal results, took little time to do. And if we just focused on that, it's so much easier than just trying to do the whole package and just get more people to buy the whole package. Does that make sense?
100%. I think it's funny because you hear 2X, 10X, like, oh, that's provocative, intriguing. I haven't read that book.
It's
yet.
phenomenal.
Although I feel like you just kind of gave me everything I needed to know from the book. But
no, because it's actually literally, I felt the same way until I read it. It's actually in the description. Like, he leads you through, like, you may have this hesitation about this. Let me talk you through this. And then like it in the applying of it, it's a brilliant book. It's one of my favorites so far. 10X is easier than 2X is wild.
10X than 2X. Cool. Even now I'm like, okay, now we're at the, we got to the whatever X point. There's always more, like, we can be more efficient. We can scale this thing bigger. And it's like, maybe I need to run it again.
Well, that's what you're doing to me. I'm like, I need to run these filters again on my business. Like,
yeah, it's almost like I should be doing this quarterly of like a baked in, like, take a Saturday, run the filter, like scrape across the top. Like, where can we just keep getting more efficient and stuff? And I know I need to do that, like, over the holidays when I can actually breathe for a second. Yeah, I love it, dude. That's a great one.
Super good. No, me and you are gonna chat afterwards. I'm gonna turn you into consultant for me for a second and be like, all right, how do we blow this thing up?
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that I'm curious about is, you mentioned that you started a marketing agency, when you were 18, and then now with Thursday Labs, you have a marketing agency to it. I don't know if that's the right, category to put it in. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between that company then and this company now?
Oh yeah, I mean that company now was a, like, full service marketing agency. We'll do whatever it is that, like, we'll create a custom bespoke package for every client, which meant we had a lot of proposals and we're constantly chasing the next deal. And there was a big referral business, and it was always different. Some of our clients were like $5,000 a month, and some were like a one-off $50K project, and some were like $2K a month for like a little thing. And it's an agency. This one is, it's sort of an agency. I hate using that word for it. I really, like, vulnerably don't know what to call it. I've been some capacity calling it, like, we're a content platform, content company. One of the big reasons I moved to Los Angeles was to double down on the vision of, like, it's the first production house for founders. You look at, like, a Hollywood studio, and they've got actors and actresses, and it's like they bring these people in almost as, like, budding seeds and turn them into stars, and, like, their whole career, as long as they are, have a lot of likeness and are growing and are doing well, They take care of all of it. They make them a freaking star. Same thing with record labels and musicians. But no one does that for tech entrepreneurs yet. The public and startup world's growing like crazy. It always has been. There's a lot of money in venture now. And people revere tech founders as rock stars. But like no one's handling their affairs from a content and thought leadership and like human standpoint. I was like, I want to build that. That's a cool vision. And so it's the beginning of the blending of Silicon Valley and Hollywood, which has never blended before. It's aggressive and outrageous for me to be like, I'm going to be the one to blend Silicon Valley and Hollywood. But I figure, I was in New York for a long time, got a lot of network in Silicon Valley, but haven't done the Hollywood side of things yet. Let me like play in that pool for a little while. So that's the big difference. It's like, this is less of an agency and more of a studio in that regard. And now everyone starts at the same point. Phase one, which is, it was $6,000 a month, and now that price has gone up to $8,000 a month, and it might go up to $10K a month soon for 4 months. Like that's the starting point. You go to our website, like it's the one offering, the one program, the one product that everyone gets. But then the results of that are different for everybody based off of their industry and like how good they were and all that. And then some end after 4 months and like they weren't successful with us or we weren't successful with them, and we call it a day, but we still had a fun engagement together and did something cool. So far, that hasn't happened yet. We haven't had any churn, but everyone, it leads to a different place. Some like next, they go heavy on like ad spend, and we're going to then triple our spend, quadruple our spend to like put more money behind all this content. Some are like, we want to go really heavy on continue on the organic, and we're going to spend more money on getting like bigger guests and just keep going the organic front. Some are like, we don't want to spend more money, we just want to keep rolling what we're doing. It's growing it's harvesting really well. Like let's just keep that rolling. Some are like, we got to get the client like speaking at conferences and writing books and like becoming, putting out their own like paid newsletter. And like, there's all these different routes that it takes them. And so I'm starting to build out departments and partnerships with the phase 2 and phase 3 teams that like, we've got like now like a paid media department. So when you get to the point of your first phase 1 got you to now you're a big paid media person, we get you in that hallway. So that's where it's going. And so we are not a full service agency, because we don't start with like, well, we'll be your full service, whatever. It's more, as you get to that point, we can then hand it off or build out the next chapter for you accordingly. Just as a studio would do for an actor who's going really big into commercials or comedies or reality TV, or a musician is getting really big in country or EDM or rock and roll or whatever it is. That's how we look at it.
Dude, I love that. I mean, you mentioned earlier Alex Hormozi. He was successful before he was a known personality, but I can't imagine that it was to the same degree that his business, not just what he makes from, likes and, engagement on social media, but literally what that's probably done for the businesses that he runs has probably 10x.
Totally.
Simply because he's a known personality, seen as a thought leader now in certain spaces. And it sounds similar. Like, is that kind of what you guys are doing?
Very much so. Yes. I mean, I look at it as it took him probably a decade to get there, but now there's probably 100 million people in the world who know the name Alex Hormozi and immediately are like, I love that guy. I would work with that guy in a heartbeat. Would be an incredible use of my money. Lots of value. Don't even care what he costs. But only a tiny percentage of those people know acquisition.com is his company, and like where at this point, probably only a percentage of his revenue comes from. But it took him a long time of building that company and producing consistent, high quality content every single day, everywhere to get there. An analogy I use a lot is akin to working out. So if people come to me and they're like, okay, Jake, I've never been to the gym before, ever. I'm overweight. I'm unhealthy. I don't sleep well. My spouse doesn't touch me. Like everything sucks. And I think it's because of my health. I want to start working out. And I'm their trainer, and we start. And then after 3 weeks, they're like, where's my six pack? Why aren't I a professional bodybuilder yet? Like, dude, you just by asking that question, I have to fire you. I know that we're never going to be successful here. We both know that this is going to take years. It's a 2 to 3 year endeavor at least for things to really change your life. But we can measure and track like wins from the start. First win, you built a studio at home. That's amazing. That's the equivalent of like walking into the gym for the first time and signing up. Like that's the hardest thing, just showing up. Huge win. Great. End of month 1. Like you've already recorded 3 episodes. A month ago, you didn't even have a camera. Now you just interviewed 3 of the biggest thought leaders in your industry. That's huge. Huge win. Let's celebrate that. Don't worry about the six pack yet. Don't worry about benching 250. fucking squatting 400 pounds, winning a bodybuilding championship. Alex Hormozi's a pro. He's the professional bodybuilder. He's been doing this for a very long time, consistently, but he had to start somewhere. And so I use that analogy with, I mean, it just keeps, there's always another way to compare this to like working out. And so it's a long-term game, or don't do it at all. Don't start now. Start in a year. You'll be a year behind. You'll have 6 other competitors who did start a year before you. I don't want people to get crushed by that wave. It's a big deal.
No, I love the working out analogy. Actually, I've used that with my clients as well, because it was a lesson for me when about 5 or 6 years ago, I was getting back into shape. I'd played sports most of my life and then got married, sat around, worked a job, and it was just like, holy shit, I went by the wayside. And so I was like, I'm really doing this, like I got back in, found a local gym, started working out with the founder and some of his trainers, just became buddies. And they're like, you really want to do this? I was like, yeah, I'm serious. And they're like, all right. So they come work out with me, do everything I'm doing. I'm like, all right. It's about 3 months in, I was not pumped with the results yet. And so I spent like an hour on Google, like looking at different ways I might need to train, and maybe I need to mix this in and do this. And I remember coming to Stuart, was the guy's name, was one of their head trainers. He was a CrossFit athlete nationally. And I was like, Stuart, hey, I've been looking up online. I'm thinking maybe I should do this. I know it's good for y'all, but maybe for me to get better results, I should do this. And he goes, stop.
Yeah. It's like, shut your mouth.
Stop. He goes, bro, you are too early to even be looking at your results. He goes, I'm going to define the win for you right now. I was like, all right, what's the win? He goes, getting in the habit of showing up. He's like, you're still in the window of time where most people will quit. And so he's like, the real win is you go from it feeling difficult to choose to go to the gym to feeling like it's second nature. And he goes, if you just track that, how many days did I get up and I came here and I showed up at 2:00 was when they worked out. I showed up at 2:00 and I joined the crew. He's like, that's the win. And he goes, if I see that is now a no-brainer for you, one, the results will follow no matter what you're doing, if you just keep showing up. But he's like, 2, it's only after that point that you and I will talk strategy. Like, let's get this solidified, and then we'll tweak strategy later if you're still unhappy with the results 3 more months from now, And that changed my life. I was like, I'm not looking at the scale. I'm not looking at my maxes. I'm looking at, I showed up again today. I did the work, and it's becoming a part of who I am now. Does that make sense?
Totally. 100%. And it's tough. And it's funny. I'm like running up on time and I can talk about this for hours, but I'm like, we live in a time in a society where like we want these quick wins. Everyone's hiring for these quick wins. We expect results faster than an Uber can show up, which is the world we live in now. And so it makes it really challenging for people who sell a process that is a long-term game. I think we're forced to like really over the top celebrate the little things. Like imagine if you came in, I bet if you went in on day 1 to the gym and the guy was like, we're going to be celebrating you showing up. We're going to be celebrating you not quitting after 3 months. You probably would have been like, well, screw that. Like that doesn't sound, wouldn't have been good sales. He didn't like, he painted the picture of how shitty and hard it's going to be. But then you get in there and you start to trust the guy, and now he has to drop the bomb on you of like, oh yeah, by the way, like you thought this was going to be great in 3 months. No, now you're at the shittiest part. It's going to be terrible for the next 8 months. Then it's going to get good. That's like buying a ticket to a flight and then being like, we get you there in 3 hours. And now you're 2.5 hours in on the flight. And they're like, sorry, it's actually going to be 9 hours, but it's going to be like the greatest flight of your life. Be like, no, terrible. So it makes it challenging for folks like you and I of like, how do we get them to sign the deal and start and then really stick around. But I think it's actually more like we got to get a bigger population of people to start than that many. We know that a decent percentage of them are not going to stick around, and that's okay. It's about finding the ones that like do stick around and who we're going to double down on.
Yeah, man. I know you got to go. So the last thought I'll say on that, and then I got a question for you to end. I think there's a growing distrust in the overpromise and underdeliver that our world has been in for so long. Yeah. And so I think just in the sales conversation, if you touch on that and you say like, hey, have you noticed that people promise you the world and never deliver? Like, I'm just not going to do that to you. Like, the reality is you can have what you want. It's just going to take longer than you've been sold. And I think it'll actually breed trust where they're like, That's what this gym does,
Yeah.
but that I still go to, that differentiates them from the 24/7s near them and all that stuff, is they're like, no, dude, it won't. It's gonna. Their phrase was, you can't undo in 30 days what you did to yourself in 30 years. And they're like, but if you join this family, you join this community, you will see a change. You know. And so I think you can sell the truth that touches on people's growing distrust of like, I knew something was fishy about making $1 million in 30 days. I knew something was fishy about like, you know, become an overnight celebrity. And it's like, that just doesn't happen. But it's not as long as you fear. It's just longer than you've been sold. You know, that's a good line, by the way. You can use that.
I was just thinking like, it's not as bad. Yeah, that's so good. I'm going to write that down.
It won't take as long as you fear, but it won't be as quick as you've been sold.
Yeah,
you know,
I love it. I'm going to definitely start having earlier conversations about that. Yeah, I try to be really transparent with folks for sure.
It level sets.
Yeah.
It level sets, you know?
Yep.
All right, last question. Where can people, if someone's listening that's like, dude, I need his services, I want to be a thought leader, I want to take, you know, whatever. How do they connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best place. That's my favorite tool right now, platform right now for what we're doing. Search my name, Jake Hurwitz, Hurwitz. If you can't find me, then you probably weren't searching hard enough. It's pretty straightforward. And the company is called Thursday Labs. So that's what we're doing. Thursdaylabs.co is the website.
Perfect. Jake, man, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Drew, great meeting you. This was a lot of fun. And let's definitely have this conversation again soon.
Let's do it, bro.
Founders, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and hop into our monthly founder email so we can ensure you stay on the edge of peak performance and massive business results.